The Green Party believes that we should remain a member of the European Union. We're committed to our continued membership, regardless of the current negotiations, and we have also supported the call for a referendum for a number of years now, because we believe that the British people do have the right to decide how they're governed. There are many, many reasons why we believe that our future is brighter as part of the EU, but I'm going to focus on just four: peace, global cooperation, the environment, and free movement. So firstly, on the issue of cooperation. We live in a world where many of our problems are global, and we need to address these at a global level. The Paris climate talks showed how difficult this can be to achieve. But the European Union is a step in the right direction, a group of nations coming together voluntarily to work on issues like climate change, migration, and global justice. Much of what we need to achieve to build the world Greens want to see is being blocked by the power of multinational corporations. Because they operate across national boundaries, we need institutions that are supranational as well. In a globalised world where capital crosses borders freely, we need international rules to keep financial interests in check and to protect human and employment rights. I see how effectively this can be done through my work on ending corporate tax avoidance. At present, the global corporations are shifting their profits around and encouraging countries to engage in a race to the bottom so that they can retain more of their profits. This is starving all our public coffers of revenue and making it impossible to fund public services properly. We can only address this issue by cooperation, and I'm working with colleagues from across Europe to change laws so that the corporations cannot avoid their responsibilities. This is beginning to work, but only because companies see that the powerful EU institutions are able to control what they do, and that we can work together to prevent tax avoidance in the single market. I think it's important that we remember the peacemaking role of the European Union, which was founded to bring European countries together in the aftermath of a devastating world war. It remains at its heart a peace-building project. I see how this works in mundane ways every day I'm in the Parliament. Conflict relies on distancing from and failure to understand your enemy. And so the daily working that we do here on all sorts of different policy issues, and even having lunch together in the canteen, makes this kind of conflict much more difficult. The peace building is central to what we do here. Britain has a particularly important role to play in this peace mission. We've made the mistake in the past of thinking that the Channel will somehow insulate us from crisis in mainland Europe. But we are absolutely necessary to the effective management of conflicts in our continent. We simply cannot duck that responsibility. We're also important to the balance of power in the European Union. And I believe that if we were to leave, this would be a fatal blow to the EU as a whole, and therefore to this very valuable institution which has kept the peace on our continent for the past 70 years. Now, I'm a Green, so I'm going to spend a bit of time focusing on the benefits that the EU has brought to our environment. As Greens, we value very much the protection of our natural places, our air quality and water quality, and the wildlife we share this environment with. The much higher standards that are required of us nationally because of the European directives are partly the result of the strong role that Greens can play in Europe because MEPs are elected here by proportional systems. Just some examples of protection offered to us by EU laws that we could not guarantee would be maintained if we were to leave the Union. Through laws to protect both birds and habitats, the UK has designated 636 nature conservation sites covering 3.3 million hectares and a further 16 marine sites covering 4.7 million hectares of our offshore waters. All European countries have to monitor and take measures to protect their designated areas from being lost and degraded. Protected wildlife sites were being lost at a rate of 15% a year before EU action. Now the rate is down to just 1% a year. The EU has led the way in introducing binding targets for greenhouse gas emissions, a 40% cut by 2030 on 1990 levels, and the UK is being constrained in its undermining of renewables because it is signed up to binding EU targets. A series of European energy efficiency measures means that domestic appliances have to become gradually more efficient. For example, fridges and freezers now use half the energy they did in 1990. Finally, I'd like to talk about free movement. In the public debate, this is often referred to negatively as immigration. But for Greens, we like the phrase free movement. We see it as one of the great achievements of the European Union and something that many of us benefit from and that younger people in our country take entirely for granted. We want to defend our rights to travel, study and work, and also to retire to whichever country we like across the European family. We are all richer, not just financially, but culturally, because we share our lives and our communities with people from 27 other countries. So before I finish, I'll say a quick word about reforms we'd like to see, because we don't think that the EU is perfect, and we want to see some important reforms that strengthen democracy. For example, reducing the voting age to 16, greater involvement of national parliaments, a stronger European citizens' initiative so that the people of Europe can challenge their policymakers effectively, and the introduction of EU-wide referenda. We also want to see a stronger, more effective European Parliament, with greater decision-making powers and scrutiny over the European Commission and the Council. We want to see it have the power to initiate legislation, to amend and veto the Commission's work programme, and to appoint, censure and dismiss individual commissioners. So the Green Party wants Britain to remain a part of the EU because we believe that we flourish when we work together on the shared problems that we face. We know that the EU isn't perfect, just like Westminster isn't perfect. We want it to be more democratic and more accountable to the citizens of Europe. We believe that a new EU is possible, where corporate influence is challenged, where power is held locally wherever possible, and where citizens have a real say. But to make that EU possible for every European, we need to stay in and to reform it from inside. Thank you.